Hello, good morning friends. Welcome back to your favorite channel Code Digest. Today in this tutorial we will learn how to create Nodejs microservices, how to run that into a Docker container, how to run MongoDB into another Docker container, and how to connect our microservices running in one Docker container to a MongoDB running in another Docker container. So we'll see all of that in this video today. Right friend? So stay tuned. It is going to be very exciting and very informative tutorial. So friend, here is the agenda of this tutorial today. I will give you introduction of Node.js microservice project. What are we trying to achieve in this tutorial? I'll cover that with architecture diagram. I'll explain you what is this tutorial all about. Then I'll give you brief introduction of Docker containers, Docker Hub repository. Then I'll show you how to download and run MongoDB into a Docker container. Then we'll understand the packages like Express Mongoose module from Node.js. Then I'll show you the Node.js coding of the microservices where we'll be coding the component like routes, controller, service layer, repository layer, database models, and our app server. Then I'll explain you how to create Docker image of our microservices, how to deploy the Docker image into a container, how to run microservice into a Docker container. And then finally, we'll be testing our microservices with MongoDB. Both are running into a Docker container. So we'll be testing those APIs. Right, friends? So it is going to be very exciting, very informative tutorial. If you want to learn the Docker container, if you want to learn Node.js, if you want to learn MongoDB, then this is a complete tutorial for you. So watch this tutorial till end. It is going to be very exciting for you guys. Friends, before we proceed in this video, I request you to subscribe this channel to grow Code One Digest family. Friends, I am creating a lot of quality videos on programming, coding concepts, design pattern and design principles, cloud and container technologies, but I'm not getting subscribers. I request you to like, share and subscribe this channel so that I can grow our Code One Digest family. Thank you.
All right, let's get started.
Okay, friends. So before we jump to implementation and coding, let me explain you what are we trying to achieve in this tutorial today through a architecture diagram. So if you see this big blue box is my machine, it's my local host machine. And then in that I have two container. I'll be defining a two container. One is for the MongoDB and other one is for our microservices. So if you see in this MongoDB container, I'm downloading a MongoDB image Docker image from Docker Hub repository, that is through internet. So I'll be downloading, I'll show you how to download particular tag of MongoDB into this container and how to run it. Then I'll explain you the port mapping, why it is important, how to identify a IP address of this Docker container, because we'll be using this IP address in our microservices to connect to this database. Once this MongoDB is running into this Docker container, we'll be connecting it through a Mongo compose running in my local machine and see the database, create database, update database, and see the record. All of that we'll do as a user. Once the MongoDB is ready, then we'll do our microservice deployment into a Docker container. I'll show you how to create a Docker image for our microservices, how to deploy and run that image into a Docker container. Right, friends? Then it will connect to a MongoDB running in a Docker container through a bridge network. This is a bridge network link that exists between the containers, and this microservices will access this database through this bridge network. Finally, once the microservices are up, then we will access these microservices or test these microservices on these ports through our Postman tool running into our local machine. Right, friends? Clear? Very simple. Two Docker containers. One is for database, one is for microservices, and they will interact with each other for database connectivity, and we'll be testing those services. So there are three things that you are going to learn thoroughly in this tutorial: Node.js, MongoDB, and Docker containers. Okay, friends?
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Okay friends, let me run you through a prerequisite for this tutorial. I'll be using Node.js 18.14.2, MongoDB Compass 1.35.0, Postman API tool I'm using 9.331.0, Visual Studio Code I'm using 1.78.2, Docker I'm using 20.10.14. These are the software that I'm using for this tutorial. You can use the latest version of the softwares for your implementation. Let me quickly brief you about Docker container. What is Docker? What is Docker container? Okay, let me explain you in my simple language. Docker containers are nothing but a lightweight operating system. Now what you have to do is, for your application, you need all the required software to run your application in that operating system, right? If you make a Java application, then you will need a JRE. If you create a Node application, then you will need a Node runtime environment to run your application into a Docker container. We create an image out of it. Image is nothing but a package. It contains your application plus all the dependent softwares required to run that application. We take that image and deploy into a Docker container that is nothing but a lightweight operating system. So when the image get deployed into a Docker container, it has all the dependencies. If you want to learn more on Docker containers, so the link is there on your screen. Go and see all this tutorial I have created in detail about Docker container and Docker images. Okay friends, so go and search the Docker Hub in Google. You will find the URL to open the Docker Hub. Click on the Docker Hub link. You got to sign in. If you don't have an account, you can register and create an account. It's a free service. I have an account. I will be logging in with my credentials. So let me log in with my credential. Yeah, Code One Digest. Yes, so I've logged in into Docker Hub repository. This is my repository, but what we want here is to explore to find the MongoDB image because we want to download a MongoDB image and run MongoDB image into our Docker container. So search here Mongo. So here you see Mongo is available. This is the Mongo and this is a command to pull MongoDB. But we want to download a specific version of MongoDB. So there are multiple tags. Every image that is available on this repository will be having a unique tag, and tag is combination of repository name and the version. So do you see Docker pull is a command, Mongo is the name of the repository, and latest is the version. So latest is the version. Likewise, we can find many different versions of images available here, but I am more interested into the Linux flavor of the MongoDB, that 6.0.6. So I'll be downloading MongoDB, this version 6.0.6. I am going to download. Here is the command to download this MongoDB image. Docker pull Mongo. Mongo is the name of repository and this is a version of that image 6.0.6. So I will copy this and I will download this image into my local Docker repository and I'll run this image into a Docker container. Right, friends? So this is a command we should be using. And just before that, let me show you. I don't have any MongoDB image in my local right now. I have some other images. There is no MongoDB image and no container running here. So I don't have any container running, no MongoDB image. So what we'll do is now we'll paste that command docker pull mongo 606. So what it will do is it will download and have that image in our local repository, in our local image list. Let me do that. So now it will download that Mongo 606. If you see it is downloading, it will take a few minutes, maybe almost done, still downloading. Once the MongoDB is downloaded, then I'll show you how to run it in a container. Right, friend? Okay, almost done. Yes, so it says it's done. Let us see now. So let me clear this up. Now let's see the images. So yes, we have this image available. Do you see the Mongo is listed in the list at the top with tag 606 and image ID is given, right?
So this is the image of size 653 MB that we have downloaded. Now next step is to run this image into a Docker container. So as I shown you right now, I don't have any container running. I don't have any container. Let me see all containers, even which are not active. So here I don't have any MongoDB container which is running the Mongo image. So what we'll do is now I will run this MongoDB image into a Docker container. So for that, let me show you the command. Okay friends, so now as we have downloaded the MongoDB image from Docker Hub repository, now next step is to run, and here is a command that we are going to use to run it. Docker run minus name is the name of the container. I am giving name of the container is Mongo 606, and minus p is for the port mapping 27018 to 27017. So what I am doing is, as we know that MongoDB runs on a default port 27017, so MongoDB will run in a container on 27017 port, but I want to map 27017 container port to our local host machine port 27018, right? So in my local machine, this MongoDB will be available to me on 27018, though it is running on 27017 inside a container. So this port mapping is to map the container port to the local host machine port. With me friends? And then this is my tag, name of my image. Okay friends, so let me copy this and we'll run the MongoDB now. So Docker images, do you see we have this image, and right now no container running. Let me paste that. Okay, so let me again show you the command. Docker run minus name Mongo 606 minus p is for the port mapping 27018 and 27017, and this is my image tag. Let me do that. Yes, so it says Docker container is running. Let us see Docker ps. So now it's saying that container is running on local host. The container is up and running, and it shows a port mapping. So now what we'll do is we'll try to connect first our Mongo compass to this DB on port number 27018. Let me do that. So this is MongoDB localhost 27018, right? I'm trying to connect the MongoDB on port 27018, which is mapped to the container port of 27017. Let me do that. Yes, so it says connected. So it says connected. Let us see what all databases we have. It is having out of the box databases, that is admin, config, and local.
Right. Okay, friends. So now let's understand some of the modules or packages that I'm using in the microservices. So the very first and important package that I'm using is Express. Express is a Node.js web application framework that provides broad features for building web and mobile applications. It is used to build a single page, multi-page, and hybrid web applications. It is a layer built on top of Node.js framework that helps manage server and routes. Then second package is the Mongoose. Mongoose is a Node.js based object data modeling library for MongoDB. It is like object relation mapping tool like Hibernate we use for RDBMS. Same way we are using Mongoose here. Mongoose allow developers to enforce a specific schema at the application layer. We define the schema in our data models, and then we use those schemas to perform the CRUD operations. Body parser. Body parser passes an HTTP request body, specifically in the context of post, patch, put HTTP request, where the information is contained in the body. Body parser allow you to access request data. It also helps in parsing the database URLs. UUID. UUID is another package that will install to generate a 16-byte unique values, and this value we will be using as a primary key for our data. Right friends, so these are some important modules or packages that I am going to use in my application. Okay friends, so now let's start with the code implementation of book microservices in Node.js with MongoDB. So before we start with the coding, you have to install those prerequisite packages what I was talking about. So you have to install the Express packages, and you can install using this command npm install express. But before that, you must have a node installed in your machine. You get node installed, and then you have to install this Express package. Same way, you have to install the Mongoose package, and the command to install Mongoose package is npm install mongoose. Same way, body parser, you can install body parser with npm install body parser, and you can install the uuid with npm install uuid. Don't worry, I'll share all this command in my readme file as well, so you will have all these commands readily available to install all the required software. Right, friends? Okay, friends. So now let me start with the coding implementation. How can you write microservice in Node.js? So we have to start very first with package.json file. In package.json file, we write what all dependencies we have, what all packages we want to use in this application. So if you see, I have defined the Express, Mongoose, body parser, and uuid. As you install those packages in this folder, in your application folder, so automatically this entry will be added in package.json. So you have to make sure that these modules, these packages are showing up after installation in package.json. Then I have just added one script here to start my application. I'll show you how to use this later. And these are the basic information of your package.json. As you create a new application, this package.json will be created with name, version, description. Okay, let me show you what all folders I have in this project. I'm at the root of my project where I have this package.json. Package log.json, you need not to make any changes. This package log.json is created automatically when you build your application with all the dependency and third-party dependencies and so on. This is the structure of my project where I have a config, roots, then controller, then service, then repository, and data models. And I also have a util to have some constants, useful files. So let's see the configuration file. We'll see the configuration file. It's very simple. Okay, let's start with the configuration file, what we have in configuration file. So I have created one database configuration.js file where I am saying module.export books MongoDB URL, Mongo URL. So this variable you can define, you can give any name and you can export it. The value of this variable is the URL, database URL of your Mongo database. If you're running your MongoDB in your local host, then you have to give 0000 because it was not working for me with the local host or 127.00.1. After debugging into Google, I found that for latest version, for few of the developer, it is working with 0.0.0, and for me also it is working. It started working with 0.0.0.0, and this is the port 27017, and this is the name of our database. So if you see, in this is a MongoDB compass, this is my books database, and I have a books collection in that database. So it is running in my local host, hence I have given this 0.0.0. If you are running the MongoDB on some remote machine, so you have to give the IP address of that machine here. Right, friends? And what we're saying is export this URL using module.export. So it will be available. When we import this module into other module, this books Mongo URL will be available to us. Now, what I'll do is I'll show you the repository layer. And before that, let me show you the model class first. So I have a books model. Here the business object is a book where all my operations are surrounding the book object, like adding of a book, then getting all the books, finding a book, updating a book information or deleting a book information. So hence I have a book as a business object. So if you see here, I am importing a mongoose module here. This mongoose module is coming from what we have installed, what we have mentioned here in this dependency. So Mongoose is loaded here in a variable Mongoose. Then we are creating a schema out of this Mongoose, and we are creating an instance of this book. We are creating an instance of this schema as a book schema and defining the attribute of that object. So the first attribute is UUID. It's type of a string. Second attribute is a name, that is the name of a book. It's also a string. Then third attribute is author name, who is the author of that book, is again a string. And release date, what is the release date of the book, and it's of type date. So we have defined the structure of our object, what all attributes are there in that object. Finally, when this is done, we'll be exporting this book schema here. So what we are saying is module.export, and using mongoose.model book schema. So whenever we want to perform operation on a book object in MongoDB, that time we'll be calling this schema. Let us see in the repository class. Okay, let me open the repository class now. So this is my book repo.js, where I have defined this book repository class, and I have a constructor where I'm initializing the book model. I'm passing the book model from outside. Whenever I'm using this class, so I'm passing a book model from a calling component. Okay, and then in this class I have defined few methods like add book, where I'm passing the UUID, name, release date, and author name as a parameter. And then what I'm saying is this dot book model. See, I'm performing an operation on a model. I'm performing that operation. This dot book model dot create. Mongoose is kind of a ORM, object relation mapping, which help us in creating a mapping between our domain object with a collection, okay, in database. So we are directly performing that operation, this dot book model dot create. It will create a book object with this data, UUID, name, release date, and author name. Now I have a second method where I'm getting all the books available in the database. So this dot book model dot find. Find is a out of the box method provided by Mongoose to get domain object, right? And domain object here is a book. So it will get me all the book object available in the database. I'm also writing another method to get a book by UUID. So this dot book model dot find one, and by passing the UUID, it will get me a book with that unique ID. Now I have another method to update a book where I'm passing the data, UUID, name, release date, and author name. So in this, I'm calling this dot book model dot find one and update. This is the out of the box Mongoose method to update an object in MongoDB. And here I am passing the UUID. It will first get the object for that UUID and it will set the value for that object. Right, friends? Then I have another method, delete book by ID. Again, we are passing the UUID to find an object and then delete it. So how are we deleting it? This dot book model dot find one and delete. So in above we were doing find one and update. Here we are doing find one and delete by passing the UUID. So it will delete the book object in MongoDB. And finally, what we are doing is we are exporting this repository class. If you see, this is the repository class. Out of that repository class, we are defining module.export is equal to book repository. Now this repository class is used in my service layer in book service. So let us see the book service now. Okay, so now in book service, we are importing a UUID module, and then we are also importing our constant module that we have defined in our util package. So in constant module, I have defined some of the messages with their status code. I'm defining 200 and the respective message that operation is successful. Same way 201 when the record is created successfully. 404 when no record found, 500 if there is any internal server error, and 422 when data validation fails. So these are some constant messages I have created. So I'm using that with the name custom resource response. Okay. Now I'm creating a book service here, class book service having constructor. Now in this constructor, I am passing a book repository. So book repository, we are passing it from outside, and we'll be using this object book repo to perform all the operation. Okay. Now I have defined add book. Okay. And before that method name, we are putting a async keyword. This tells that this method is asynchronous method. It will run asynchronously, right? That is the power of Node.js. Need not to wait for or hold for that operation to complete. Okay. So I have defined a method add book. We are getting a request object. Then from request object, we are retrieving the body. So from body, we are retrieving all of that. And we are generating a unique ID using a UUID module that we have imported above. We are saying uuid.v4. So here we will be getting 16 byte unique identifier, unique string. Now we have that, and at this line I am saying that this dot book repo, because book repo is the object that we have passed in a constructor, this dot book repo dot add book. If you remember, in the book repo we have defined this method add book, and it was accepting all these 4 parameters: uuid, book name, release date, and author name. So we are calling it that we are calling the repo method in this service class in add book function. Then we are checking if the book object is created successfully, because that method is returning a book object. If not, if this is null or this is empty, then we are sending the error message with the status code, that server error. We could not save that book. If a book is not empty and having a proper object, then we are setting a message that that book is created successfully, and this is a status code. 201 is a status code that we are getting it. And data, in the data response.data, we are setting the book object itself. And finally, we are returning a response for this add book function. Right, friends? Same way, we have another method get all book in service layer, where I am calling this dot book repo dot get all books. This is giving me all the books available in our repository, in our database. And again, we are checking if the book object is empty or not. If empty, then we'll be showing the error message. If not, we'll be showing the successful message with those object list. Why we have said books? Because we are getting all the books. Hence, it is going to be kind of a list of a books or array of the books. Now, next method is get book by ID. And here we are getting a request object. From request object, we are retrieving a unique ID. Okay. And by calling this repository method, this dot book repo dot get book by ID, we are passing the ID here and we are getting the book. If a book is not found with that ID, we will be showing the error message that record not found. And if the book object is found with that unique ID, then we'll be showing the successful message here with the success 200 response code. And the data of response object is book, and we are returning a response here. Same way, we have update book by ID method, where we will be updating the book object. We are retrieving the name, release date, author name from the request object, and we are calling this method this dot book repo update book by ID, and by passing all those 4 parameters: uuid, name, release date, and author. So book repository will find if there is an object available in database with this UUID. If yes, then it will set this new value for that object. If update is not successful, then we'll show the error message that record not found. And if update is successful, then we'll show a success message which with 200 status code, and data is the updated book object. Same way, we have a delete method where we'll be deleting the object by calling this dot book repo delete book by ID. by passing the UUID. If delete is not successful, then we'll show the error message. And if delete is successful, then we'll be setting the message, status code, and the body accordingly. Finally, after all this operation, we are exporting the book service. If you see here, module.exports is equals to book service. Okay, friends, so you need not to worry about all of this code. This code and this project is available in my Git repository. You can download the code from this Git repository. I'll be sharing a link in description section of this video, so you can clone this project and start using it. All the instructions how to compile and run this application is given in README. I have given the architecture diagram, then I have explained the prerequisites, all the commands, how to start, how to test. In fact, I have also shared the Postman collection in test Postman folder. So this JSON you can import in your Postman and you will have all those operations ready to test. So in testing, how to test, the instructions are there to import the Postman collection and start using it. And these are the endpoints that we have defined as a part of this application. We have post endpoint, get all, then get by ID, update by ID, and delete by ID. Okay, so just download this repository in your local and start using it. Okay, friends. Okay, friends. So now I have shown you the book service. Next, what we'll see is the controller. Our controller component calls the service. So now we will see a controller. So in this controller, you can see I'm importing the book service module. I'm also importing the book repository module. And then I'm creating a book model by importing a book from a model directory. So this book model is created. Then I'm initializing an object of a book repository by passing the book model. Now I'm creating an instance of book service by passing the instance of book repository here. So I'm creating book service is equal to new book service by passing the book repository object that I have created at line number 7. Now I'm defining and exporting the method one by one in controller class as well. So I'm saying the method name is addBook and it is going to run asynchronously. It has request, response, and next parameters. And in this method, if you see, I'm calling the method of service layer, that is book service dot add book, right? If everything is fine, status code in response object will be is getting set accordingly. If there is error, then error will be printed here. Same way, I have a get all method where I'm calling the book service dot get all books. Get book by ID, then I'm calling the book service dot get book by ID. Same way, I have update book by ID. So I'm calling book service dot update book by ID. And I have method delete book by ID. So I'm calling book service dot delete book by ID. So all the methods in the control layer is calling the methods of book service layer as we have seen in the architecture diagram. Right, friends? Now we will see our roots component. Now, friends, let's see a root component. What roots, what endpoints we have defined. So this is my book roots.js file where I'm importing Express because Express give me all the libraries and functions that is required to create a web application or mobile application or microservice applications. So using Express only, I can define a routes. Then from Express, I'm creating a router to create route, all my routes. Then I'm also importing a controller because I'll be calling the method of controller for each and every route. So if you see, my first route is it's of type post and it is to add a book saying /book/add. So whenever user calls this /book/add, I'll be calling book controller.addBook function. Then I have another endpoint of type get/books, that is to get all the books. And here I'm calling book controller.getAllBooks. I have another get endpoint /book :UUID. That means I want to get books by unique ID. So I am calling method here book controller dot get book by ID. I have a put method. The endpoint is slash book colon UUID, and I am calling a book controller dot update book by ID. Then I have delete endpoint slash book colon UUID, and I am calling controller dot delete book by ID. Right, friends? So roots is taking a request and calling the book controller function. And finally, we are exporting module.exports this router. So this router is now exposed. Now let me show you our main server application JavaScript file. That is our book server.js. This is where is the application is getting stitched and our application is starting. So this is our JavaScript file to start our microservices. So here I am importing Express, body parser and Mongoose module. Then I am also importing the our custom responses from a constant file. I am loading a database configuration because we will be connecting to database. As I shown you in a database config, I have a URL of database, so that I am importing it here. And then finally I am importing a routes because I'll be routing all incoming requests through a router. I'm creating an app using Express function. Then in app, I'm saying that I'll be using the body parser. And if you see line number 13, where I'm connecting to a MongoDB database. So mongoose.connect, and in the connect function, I'm taking dbconfig.bookmongo URI. That means I'm passing first parameter is the URL of my database that I'm passing through database config, and then it is printing console.log that MongoDB is connected if it is successful. If there is error, then I am printing a error here in catch block. Then I'm defining all my routes by saying app.use the endpoint of my application and book routes. How the endpoint will be created? I will say localhost 8080 slash API slash v1, and then the endpoint what we have defined in our routes. Then these are some error handling for 404, how to send this message if the URL, if the user is entering a wrong URL. So we have to show this message. This again an error handling. Finally, we have defined at which particular port we want to run our application, that is 8080. And then at this line number 37, I'm saying app.listen. That means I'm saying start my server on this port, app.listen port 8080, and I'm printing that book server started and listening on a port, right? So this is where my application starts. Okay, friend.
Okay friends, so now as you have seen that we have started our MongoDB into a Docker container, and we want our microservices running in another container and connect to this Docker container for MongoDB. Hence, we would like to know the IP address of MongoDB Docker container. So how can we find the IP address of MongoDB Docker container? So here is a command. So we'll use inspect command of container, and we'll try to grab the IP address, because if we do the inspect on these, I will get a lot of information. Docker inspect this container ID. This is my MongoDB container ID. So if you see the lot of information, hence though I could see the IP address, but we can simplify by using a grep on this grep IP address. Yeah, so you directly get the IP address of your container. That means this is the IP address. I will make a note of this IP address, and I'll use this IP in my microservices database config file. So let me do that. I'll copy this IP address and go to my database configuration. Here if you see, we have 000 for localhost, but now we will be accessing that in container. Hence I'll be pasting the IP address Okay, I pasted the IP address and we'll be accessing on port 27017 inside a container. So as I shown you in the architecture diagram, that when a container talks to another container, they use a bridge network and they have to use the container IP and container port. So in this connection, we don't need a port mapping. Port mapping is required when we want to access any application which is running in a container outside the container into a local machine. But here, between the container to container communication, we have to use their actual container IP and container port. So that is why I have given this container IP address and port of my MongoDB. Right friends, with me? Now what we'll do is, we'll now create a image of our microservice application. Let me do that. Okay friends, before we jump to create the Docker image of our microservices, we have to create and understand the Docker file. So I have created this Docker file at the root of my project, at the root of my microservices, and these are the content of my Docker file. If you see the very first line, I'm saying from node 18. That means it will download the node version 18, right? And then it will set the working directory as /user/src/app. So this will become my working directory. Now what I am doing is, now I'm copying all the package star.json from my project to this working directory. So I have package log.json, package.json, so it will get copied to my working directory. This will tell that what all dependencies I have and how my project structure look like. When this copy is done, then I am running npm install to download all the dependencies inside a container. So it will create a node module folder inside this working directory for me, where I will have all the code, all the dependencies downloaded. Once this is done, then I'm copying all my controllers, repository, routes, everything from my project to working directory. Finally, what I'm doing is I'm exposing 8080 because I'll be running my microservices on port 8080. Hence, I want to expose that 8080 to external world, to my local machine outside the container, so that I can test that microservices from my local host machine. Okay, so microservices is running in a container on port 8080 and I'm exposing that 8080 port so that I can create a port mapping from 8080 port of container to a local port. Okay, and then I'll be accessing these microservices on that local port. So I'm exposing 8080 port of the container, and this is a command to start my microservices node book server.js. Right friend, clear? Now what we'll do is we'll create a command to build a microservice image, Docker image. We create a command to create the Docker image of our microservices. So here is the command. What I am using is docker build -t, and -t is for the tag. I am giving a tag as Code1 Digest and Nodejs bookmark microservices with MongoDB, right? And dot. So this is the command will create an image. And before that, let me show you, do I have any image available? So Docker images. So I don't have any such image right now. I have other images. I have MongoDB image and I have other Spring Boot images and so on. And any container that is running, yes, so I have MongoDB container running. But now what we'll do is we'll create the Docker image for our project. So I'm creating docker build -t Code1 Digest / Nodejs book microservices with MongoDB dot. So this will create the image for my microservices. Let me do that. Let me hit this. Yes, so it is creating the image. It is downloading the dependencies and so on. Yes, so it said it is done. Let us see Docker images if our image is created. Right friends, so you see this image is created for our microservice project, right? So now we'll run this microservices into a Docker container and see if it is able to connect to a MongoDB running in another Docker container. I will now run this microservice image into a Docker container. But before that, we have to create a command to run microservices into a Docker container. So how the command will look like? So this is a command to run our microservices. Docker run -p is for the port mapping. What I'm saying is map the port 8080 of container to localhost port 8080. That means I am mapping the container port 8080 to localhost port 8080, and I'll be accessing the microservices from my local machine on 8080 port. Once this is done, then I'm giving the tag of my microservices that I've created. So the tag what we see here, this is the tag. This is the complete name of my microservice tag, right? So let me copy this command and we'll paste it here. So docker run -p 8080 map to 8080, and this is my image name. Let me run that and we'll see if it is able to connect to a MongoDB running in another container on that specific IP address of that container. Let us do that. Yes, so it says that book server started on port 8080 and MongoDB, it's connected to MongoDB, which is running in another container. Right, friends? Let us now test our microservices through a Postman tool. Okay, friends, so now what you see on your screen is my Postman tool where I have this collection. So here is my collection, Nodejs book microservices with MongoDB, where I have defined all these endpoints. Let me open this get all books. So here I am trying to access localhost 8080 API v1 books, as our microservice is running on 8080, hence I am trying to access on 8080 port. Let me hit this endpoint and see if I am getting any data, because I know there are no data in my database, right? So it says though the request is successful, 200 response I am getting, but there is no data in database. So what I'll do is first I'll insert a book into my database. So I'll say my book 1 and Pavan, and it is releasing on 15th July 2023. If you see the URL here is of type post localhost 8080 /API/v1 book add. So this is our API, this is our endpoint to add book into repository. Let me do that. Yes, so again, so I got 201 response. That means the item is created, and in the response I am getting the object that is created in MongoDB with the UUID, unique ID. This is a primary key of my object. This whole key is the primary key of my object. So here the name is my book 1 and author name is Pavan and release date is 15 July. Let me copy this ID, and now I'll hit another endpoint, get book by ID. So here in this URL I give my ID as a path parameter, and if you see, it is a get type of call where I am saying localhost 8080 API v1 book, and then the ID of my object, ID of my book. Let me hit this and see if I am getting the object. Yes, so I am getting the book object by ID. That means my get by ID endpoint is working fine. Now what we'll do is we'll update this object with a put operation. So here if you see, I have a put operation, and then it is localhost 8080 API v1 book, and again taking a ID of my object, which object I want to update. So I'll push, I have pasted the ID that I have copied, right? I have pasted the ID that I have copied in previous window, and now I will say my book name is my book 2, and now it is author name is Modi, and I'm changing date to 10th of August. Let me update it. Yeah, so it says 200 response and the object is updated with the same UUID. Now the book name is my book 2, author become Modi. And now what I'll do is, let us again try to get that book with ID and see if we are getting the changes. Yes, so if you see here, I am getting a data with updated information. Now next what we'll do is we'll try to delete this book object in our repository with the same ID. So if you see, I'm using delete as a method and my endpoint URL looks like localhost 8080 API v1 book, and it takes the ID of my book that I want to delete. I'll just hit this and see if this is deleting. So yet it says 200 response, that means that object is deleted, that record is deleted in database. Let me try to get again by ID if this book exists or deleted in database. So it says no record found, that means that record is deleted. Let me try to do a get all if I'm able to get through get all API, but I'm seeing that it is empty. That means the object is deleted successfully. Let me insert one more time. Yeah, so now the object is created and I can do a get all, and this is now my new primary key to access that object, and I can copy that primary key to test with get by ID. Okay, so yes, so I am able to get that object now, right friends? So we have tested all the operation: get book, add book, update book and delete book. So all these operations are successfully performed. That means that our microservices is working perfectly fine in a Docker container and able to connect to a MongoDB running in another Docker container, and these two containers are connected with each other through a bridge network, right friends? As I have shown you that we are able to perform get operation, add operation, update operation and delete operation on our microservices successfully, right friends? If you like this video, so give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, so do subscribe to our channel to grow Code One Digest family. It's always a good practice that we do a cleanup after our testing. As we have done the testing, so let us stop all our server that are running. So if you see, we are running these two containers, one is for MongoDB and one is with our microservices. So let's stop these containers, otherwise these resources will be consumed, the CPU and RAM will be consumed and your machine will become slow. So this, just stop this container. If you're not using it, first you stop the microservice container, docker stop the container ID is the command. So it is taking some time to stop it, right? So now it's stopped. If you see, now only single container is running, so we'll say docker stop MongoDB container ID. So let's stop this, yeah, and docker ps. So now we don't have any container running. So it's always a good practice, after you do your testing, you do your work, you stop all the container running, be it on your local machine or be it in your cloud, right friends?
Okay friends, so let me summarize what we learned in this tutorial today. I gave you introduction of Nodejs microservice project with MongoDB in Docker container. Then I explain architecture diagram. What are we trying to achieve in this tutorial today? Then I gave you basic explanation of Docker container and Docker Hub repository. What is containerization? What is Docker image and all of that. Then I explained you few of the packages like Express, Mongoose that we are using it in our project. Then I shown you the Node.js coding implementation of our microservices module like routes controller, service repository, and database model, etc. Then I explained you how to find an IP address of database Docker container. Then I have shown you how to run the microservices into a Docker container and connect to a database Docker container. Finally, we tested our microservices running into a Docker container and connected to a MongoDB running in another Docker container. Right, friends? So if you like this video, so give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, so subscribe to our channel to grow Code One Digest family. Thank you. Friends, if you like this video, so give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for the more interesting videos. Click on the bell icon for the latest video notifications and do not forget to share this video with all your friends and colleagues. This is very useful information for students, beginners and software engineers. I am putting a lot of efforts in creating these contents. So please help me growing the Code One Digest family. Please subscribe to Code One Digest channel for the latest programming and technology related videos. Thank you.